live now.
Oh, I've pressed the wrong button, but here we are. Good afternoon, everybody. I twitched on a button too fast and skipped the intro, but here we are.
Could go back and play it again, but
I was far too excited that for the first time in weeks we are starting more or less on time. That's what it is.
That's what's happened.
Yeah, so it's very much it's just an exciting day. I am Liam Gulliver, and joining me, as always, are my two irreverent co-hosts.
Irreverent?
Irreverent. I'm just picking random words today.
Well. Oh, I can't hear him now.
That's because I stopped talking, Pete. That's why. That's how it is. Yeah. But yeah, joining me as always are Jonathan and Pete. And today we're more or less going to carry on with what we were doing on the last show a couple of weeks ago. We're going to be building out our zero-touch pipeline for Gitwatcher, and of course, as always, you can get to the code and everything and join us along at home by going to the link above at the moment, which is github.com/Azureish live, and you can see the Gitwatcher repo in there, along with all our YAML, Terraform, function apps, and so on as well. And on today's show, like I say, we're actually going to try and deploy something to our aforementioned infrastructure. So last time, we got to the point where we've got our storage account set up for our TF state. We've got our Terraform set up to deploy a function app for one of our backend APIs. And then today, we're going to expand our pipeline to actually do that deploy as well. So let's move on over to
push the button.
Project. Yeah. So where did we get to last time? So we had literally just done that last bit. So if I get into pipelines in here, and we've got our Gitwatcher API.
I remember we hung on for the last minute over the hour just to see it happen.
So we've got build, our prereqs are here, and we're going out to our dev environment now as well. Apparently we've got multiple provider blocks specified, but we can figure that out later. We want to edit this pipeline for now. And we're going to want to quickly sign in. So I'm just going to move that over there for a moment. Because I don't know if you saw, but there was an issue yesterday with GitHub and authentication or authenticated sessions where they've had to log everybody out.
I did not see that.
Yeah. So that's fun and exciting thing. I've not read the full article on it yet, but so they've had to log everyone out.
A few bits happening actually. I've spotted along with James Miller, who's a fellow Pluralsight author, that the IoT Defender for IoT service isn't working properly either. There's a global problem with that, which is nice. And also there's a problem with the VS Code extension for deploying IoT Edge modules as well. Something's not working there either. So a few little bits.
Was that a thing yesterday as well?
It probably is indeed. Yeah, my friend Paul DiCarlo has brought that one to my attention. So yeah.
Okay, so now that we're all logged in, here's where we got to. So we've got our branches with our triggers, and we've got paths for our back end. This is still .NET Core 3. We'll go and upgrade it in a later show. What we've also not done on this occasion is we've not built out any task templates or action templates, depending on how you want to use the terminology. We're actually just doing everything by hand this time. So we've not gone down into the real advanced stuff yet. But we will take a look at that in a future episode as well. But for now,
that's something that becomes very relevant when you start to want to push to another environment other than one. I think I find an awful lot of CI/CD resources out there tend to just show you getting it out to a single instance in the cloud, i.e. prod, and you're like, well, that's not a real world scenario. And you're right that templates is a really good way of just saying, well, here's a repeatable set of steps, and we're just going to do it for each environment and just plug in the variables.
Oh yeah, I mean for sure. So there's a guy I work with at work called Anthony Lehman, and he's taught me a couple of things over the past couple of months where we've been working quite closely on some projects, where we've managed to build out some pipelines where they're almost entirely template driven. So all we have to do now to set up a new CI/CD pipeline is pick the templates we want, put the templates in the order, and fill in some blanks, and we're done. Yeah. Like it's super slick. It's really cool. And we can go through that in a later show as well. So yeah, just for reference on where we're at. So our environments. So we have our job for dev. We replace our tokens in our Terraform variables with variables out of our pipeline. We do a Terraform init, Terraform plan, and then we do an apply. So which basically puts us right at the point of having infrastructure stood up from Terraform and Azure.
Yep.
And now we can literally do that package deployment, can't we? Or artifact deployment. So that seems about right there. Okay.
So that Terraform plan stage there, is that the part that looks at what you've already got and decides what you need? Based on
so if we go back into here into a successful one, it should show us go into our logs, which we need to name better than task
display names,
which we'll do in just a second as well. So you can see that here's the plan that's generated. It's taken a look. It's saying, okay, well, this needs to be replaced because we renamed it. We've got our actual resources that are going to get set up and stuff that we know after it's actually been applied and how it's really going to look.
If it was skipped that step, would apply just do a plan anyway, or do you always have to do a plan first?
Don't know the answer to that. I think you always have to do a plan.
Okay, I was just wondering what happens if this step
because it creates a file.
Are we expecting it to fail at any point if it was to look at the subscription and say I can't do this?
It can do if it doesn't have access. So remember, right way back in the first part, I think we set up like an SPN that we can use, or a service principal. So we can with I think contributor access, so we could actually take a look at some of these bits and pieces to generate these plans. If it doesn't have permissions, it'll fail, which means we can't go any further.
What's and you can answer this while you carry on, but what's the workflow for things that you don't want to destroy? You just mentioned there that there was something that it wanted to replace because we renamed it. How do you work with caches and log file storage and stuff like that need as part of your infrastructure, but you perhaps also don't want to destroy?
So I think, Pete, we should cover that as we go.
Okay.
Ultimately, as you know, if you rename a resource in Azure, there's no such thing as a rename action. You have to create
exactly.
You have to destroy it and recreate it, or just create the whole new one. But where we're updating things like configuration and so on, we can cover that in a minute.
Yeah, cool. I mean, for me, it feels like you want to be careful of what I define as engines of work, things that you can lose, and they are just working on items of data sent to them. And the storage, you're correct, is you have to think about it in a different way, because you can't just delete a storage account and recreate it because you've lost everything that was in it. So it does, infrastructure as code does force you to think about the life cycle of these things.
I mean, I guess a different way to think about renaming, so from a different point of view, would be, say, changing tier. So if you're going from an S1 to an S2 or something like that, is that something that does it destroy it, or does it actually use the built-in scaling there to
it depends on the module, then I guess is
sure. I mean, that's the thing. Like, so I mean, part of me saying let's do it in here and find out is because I can't remember. So
I think
that's the point of doing these streams this way, though, isn't it?
If you look at if you're scaling up like an Azure SQL instance, behind the scenes, what it's doing on your behalf is creating a new empty one, and it manages the cloning of data across for you, and only makes it available once that's finished. So, I think there is no single answer for that question. It depends on the resource that you're spinning up, and also what, considering we're using Terraform here, what support the module does for that kind of stuff. But it tends to be that there isn't a single hammer that you can apply for storage, because you might want to treat how you copy data around differently than anybody else. So I think, it depends is the classic IT answer.
Pretty much. So let's get into adding a deployment. So I'm just going, what you guys have been talking as well. So I'll just go through the tasks that we've got here. So we've got a couple of options. There is the Azure App Service Deploy option, and then there is this Azure Function side of things.
Yeah, I've used the function.
See, I like to do the other one.
Why do you like the other one then?
I feel like to be honest, for me, it's more familiar when we're doing stuff with PaaS, but also it gives us a little bit more flexibility around things. So I can say, all right, well, I want to do Function App on Windows here, because I think we are doing a Windows one. Let's just double check our Terraform to make sure that is the case. And I'm not just making that up.
He's making it up as he goes along.
I think they're Windows by default, unless we say otherwise.
Just out of interest, though, why is it asking for that? Because surely that's already spun up by our Terraform step earlier. So surely we're just deploying the source code into something that Terraform's created now. I'm just trying to work out whether if this task is actually doing more than just, it's actually trying to do an ARM, because you've got a connection type ARM at the top. Would it create it if it didn't exist?
I think it's just because this app service deploy thing, because ultimately function apps still sit on app services,
right? Yeah, absolutely. They're just.
But I think this is more based on what actions and options we have underneath this whole process. But in truth, I don't. Right,
I'm having a quick look. Carry on wiring it up. I'm having a look at the task while you're having a look.
So which task this? This is Azure App Service to deploy. That task you're just saying there, that task should be carried out entirely by part of Terraform, shouldn't it? Or is this a subsection of a Terraform task that we're looking at?
This is neither. This is going to be its own task.
The prerequisites do state that this task is used to deploy a web app project or Azure function project to an existing Azure App Service instance. So it's interesting that they're asking you the web app kind. Okay.
But how does it work in the Azure client?
It's a good question. I haven't used that. The last time I've done it, I've used the Azure function app task in this. I've not done it from the CLI.
Okay.
Recently. Cool. So what else do we need to fit in? You've got the app service name. You've got.
Yeah, I'm going to change that in a minute to.
That needs to come from a variable, doesn't it?
It will do. But I'm going to put the thing in first and then go from there. And then we need the package.
Does the function app type, the function app itself probably doesn't really care, because it's like a Docker image, I think, isn't it? Essentially, a little VM that you're deploying into an app service is a.
No, well, I've just normally from me, you're deploying the built artifacts from the Visual Studio compile. It's just a zip of DLLs and resources, so it's not a container.
Yeah, so I just want to see what
app service plan is effectively IIS in the cloud.
Yeah,
and so all you're doing is you drop in the zip file of what's been built in the bin debug bin release folder.
Do we set the Windows Linux at the app service level then? I can't remember.
Yes,
you do. Yeah.
Right, that explains it then. Yeah, that makes more sense.
So I just want to grab our build artifact. So we've got two pipeline artifacts. Rather, we've got a pipeline artifact and we have a build artifact. And one we set as a build artifact. Don't remember why we did, but we did. So what I'm going to do is download that artifact.
Cool. So is that called drop?
It is drop, yes. So I'm actually just going to, whilst we're here, I'm going to just add this task in kind of as is, which I can't seem to scroll down on the page today, which is less than useful. But then we're going to have that extra step here, aren't we? No, I don't want to cancel time. Go away. And they build artifacts. There you go. So specific artifact.
Yeah, because this was something that I hadn't twigged to begin with, is that, moving on to a second job step or stage rather, you do end up getting a new build agent assigned to your step, and so therefore this download is necessary because it's not in the working directory anymore.
So we've got a current build. Our artifact name is just drop, isn't it?
Yeah. Which makes sense, I suppose, that the point about needing to download it, because if you were doing parallel steps where you wanted to do multiple things at the same time, you wouldn't have a single build agent then. So thinking of them as separate build agents, and I have being cloud resourced, there are times that I've sat there twiddling my thumbs waiting for a one to become available, just because it's been busy in the cloud at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we're downloading drop, which means then we have effectively that should work, but we've got, it's got a particular name, hasn't it? Backend.zip.
I guess so star would do, but it might as well be
a little bit more specific just in case. And then what we've got is our shortcode and everything else, so we can bring in that string concatenation further down. So let's got a package for Linux. Yeah, my web app name there, which I think we can just do $, whatever we call it, shortcode. Yeah, shortcode. Then it was our product
and environment _name.
Product by Ron.
Yep.
Location.
Yep.
Then that's that, really. So let's hit save and see what happens.
Yeah, because the function app task offers similar inputs. All I've had to do is, when I've used it in the past, is wire up the subscription, the app type you set to function app, and then pass in the app name and the package you're deploying. And I've just used, there's a property called deployment method, and you can say it's a zip deploy, and it just handles it. So yeah, similar number of inputs.
So, yeah, I don't see the point in having the two separate.
Well, at the moment, the only way to specify Windows or Linux is with the one you use, Liam. It sounds like Jonathan's doesn't let you specify that.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like you need to either.
No, you don't, because you're already deploying it into an existing app service. That's why I'm confused by the app service one not requiring it, but offering it as a.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's going to deploy the app service as well. If it's
it says web app kind is only required if the connection type equals Azure RM. Connection type is Azure RM.
I was going to say, most of the time we'll be using Azure. If we're deploying to an Azure function app, we're going to be using Resource Manager.
Yeah, interesting.
Right, let me just refresh this page, because that seems to be doing a grand total of nothing.
Waiting for a build agent.
We are. I don't like, this is a pre-existing open project though, so I don't think we're impacted by the rejigging of Microsoft's free offering for agents.
Well, not impacted.
Lower on, because it's carried on. Is that just debug statements that it's?
Yeah, it's kind of. This is just
preparation. Yeah, we are just waiting for a. This is what I was saying earlier. You just need to acquire an agent first. And there's nothing. It's like waiting for the kettle to boil.
So what's waiting? Pete, what are you doing on your show later?
Oh, it's exciting. I'm excited. We've got Olivier Bloch from the Microsoft IoT team coming on. So that's going to be quite cool. He's going to help us talk about the latest IoT announcements out of Ignite this year. I'm also going to talk about the latest advancements for the Pico producer. And in fact, it's a circuit board that I designed and built recently. In fact, that's on YouTube now as a stream. I thought it's probably still on the Twitch channel too. So that was good fun. So talk about that, and also talk about my remote robot arm, and I've created a VR app for my Oculus Quest 2. That lets you control that robot arm from the Quest app, but also, as it's all Signal R, you can go to a website and you can control the real robot arm, and it will control an in-app robot arm directly as well. So everything's all linked up. I was quite excited that it got retweeted by David Fowler, in fact, one of the architects of Signal R. So that was quite cool.
That's pretty cool.
Mm.
Have you coded it with Asimov's 3 laws to make sure it doesn't smash your desk up yet?
I've coded it to make sure it doesn't apply to it, and in fact, it will attempt to smash the desktop. In fact, it does. In fact, when you give that address out to people and let them play, smashing itself up against things is probably the first thing that it tries to do. It's quite funny watching people. But I demonstrated it to my 2 daughters and their 2 cousins last night, and they were in awe of what you could do. The remote control this robot is. It was pretty.
It's a great
cool
demonstration of the technology you've wired together. It's really good. So that'll be interesting to watch. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to the demo of that. And it'd be cool with Olivier being there as well. I have to get David Fowler on one week.
I
So
have to have an ad break at this rate.
Yeah, it's kind
Join
of
us after the break as we come back to find if the cloud build agent has become available. Live
it's
coding.
not really doing anything. Is there
Let me just have a look at the old Azure status page.
I can say status.dev.azure.com.
Yeah, does it tell you about DevOps in there?
It does.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
It's like I say. Yeah.
Item. Everything's green across the board. Liars.
Well, it is green. It's just the fact that it's busy. It's not unavailable. It's just.
There should be a busy status then, shouldn't there?
Well, I've also set the project to private to see if that solves the open sourceness of things. It's definitely gone to an agent.
How do you know that?
There's a.
So you can go to. Yeah, you can see this waiting. But you can also go to your agent pools as well and see our Azure pipelines just in here. And we can take a look at what agents there are. And you see just down the bottom of the screen here.
Yeah, hosted.
You see what agent it's sat on.
When it says hosted, does that mean what's that? Where is that? Is that hosted in Azure or is that self-build?
No, that's definitely an Azure hosted one.
Right.
What's parallel jobs saying?
What's that red thing? Free tier.
We are on the free tier.
One parallel job, yeah. Well, we don't need parallel jobs.
View in progress jobs. There's our in progress job.
We're going to go around a big loop here and go all the way back to where we were a second ago. Look.
Yeah.
I like it. Infinite loop. It's like expanding that JSON and finding the object itself is in the JSON. You expand it again and Inception.
The Azure status pages, but all have RSS feeds associated with them all, so that's quite useful for hooking into your appropriate chat tool, and then you can actually keep an eye on Azure statuses in your Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever you use.
Perhaps we should add one to our stream, a little ticker at the top.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm gonna whilst we're waiting for this, I am gonna run a little ad break. It's just run a 60-second one. I don't know if
background music
folks that are already subscribed to us will be able to see it or not, but we'll soon find out.
I might skip it anyway. We can carry on talking.
But yeah, this is just sat doing...
Well, let's think about something else that we can do in the meantime. Like, what's the next step while we're waiting for that to build?
So next step would be...
before that, wait. Before that, would it be worth coming off the free tier? I mean, we have credits we can spend. Does that help us?
I've made it a private project, so it should be okay. One of the next things we need to do anyway is do the build and stuff for the front end. So we might as well do that as well.
That's a good idea. Because we're only building the back-end function app at the moment, aren't we? So we need to look at the build for the Blazor app, which I've never done before. So this is new territory for me.
.NET new Blazor WASM.
We've already got new.
That's true.
It should just be .NET build again. It should be no different at all. The only thing may be that we need... it builds with .NET Core, doesn't it? So doesn't even matter that it's not a Windows agent.
Okay, well, I need to...
This week where I had to do that. Oh, it was my... I'd picked from the DevOps templates, one of the things you can pick to run your tests is a Visual Studio test runner. Right. And I added that to my project, and then it complained because I was on the Ubuntu pipeline. Whereas in fact, obviously, because it's a .NET Core, it's a .NET Core compatible project that I was working on, I realized, of course, all I needed to do was .NET test. It's kind of, it was runnable by the .NET Core runtime anyway, my tests. Mm-hmm. And so actually it was that Visual Studio test runner wasn't adding any value because my XUnit tests still ran fine anyway. So yeah. So it's impressive just how much you don't have to wait for for a Windows image. And I've found in the past that actually Windows images, especially if you are changing the version of SDK that you're compiling, and that can be for backwards compatible projects, that it takes time. It takes longer for the build agent to become available, because not only has it to become available, but then you're also waiting for dependencies to be installed on it. And so in many respects, the Ubuntu .NET Core cross-platform, it is so much quicker, I find, building on.
Oh, yeah, vastly. You don't have all the weight of Windows, ultimately.
Yeah.
What have you just done there, Liam?
I've just created the blank project, the blank pipeline for the front end. I click save and run just to see if it kicks its ass into doing something.
What's this going to do? Explain to me. What are you doing with this pipeline now?
So this will be for our Blazor front. So for folks who've been following along through all the Git Watcher stuff, you'll know that we have all our backend APIs are a function app, essentially, and then we have a functions proxy that sits in front of it. But our UI that gives us the little bit at the bottom of the screen that you see on the stream now, or if you're watching back on demand on YouTube, is actually using a Blazor WebAssembly project. But most importantly, we're using that as a standalone Blazor WebAssembly project. So we're actually hosting it out of a storage account ultimately.
Static files. Yeah.
Completely static files. And then we go up to the functions proxy, which then handles any authentication between the front end and the back end functions as well. And it's all locked down with things like cores and everything else, which ultimately gives us a level of security there with a cheap and cheerful / free API gateway, depending on how many requests there are to it and so on.
So the idea is that we're going to pick up our source files from the Git Watcher repository, which we obviously need to add to this pipeline, and deploy them into the now stood up after the Terraform pipeline is run app service. There's going to be an app service for the Blazor web app, as well as all the functions that we've got too.
Yeah, are we going to do that into the same app service plan, or are we doing a different one? Because we set up the function app service plan in Terraform to be the Y1 consumption plan, didn't we? So
yeah, so we would
that in the same one.
You'd probably be right. I think how we did it before by hand was we had a separate plan for the proxy, because they're two differently shippable entities. I'm a big fan of single responsibility type stuff with this kind of thing. So I like with our APIs, if we've got our backend API function, and which we might want to break down into multiple function apps for whatever reason, we could put all those in one plan. But I would still keep them one-to-one, and then with the proxy, one function to one plan in this instance. Though we're not actually running a function, are we? In that regard, I think when we're doing it by hand as well, we did try doing it on the same plan, and it caused a couple of headaches because of how it treats the term localhost. So having them separate was a better option. But okay, so this is. I am wondering, if it's not just for the open source projects, if it is just the free offering altogether is no longer a.
You would have hoped that it would have given you more feedback than just spinning wheels.
I suppose that's all it knows, though. It's that you're in a queue. I guess it's not going to give you that, next customer, please, notification. But
Microsoft hosted.
See what it says on the info.
Got the free tier.
Well, we don't care about parallelism because we're only trying to do one, really. 10 free pipelines is for open source projects.
Yeah, so that grant is no longer a thing. And as I understood it, that grant was going away just for new projects, whereas we aren't on a new project here, are we? We're pre-existing.
Still could have fallen foul of it.
Yeah. But I've also made it a private project now.
So one free job that can run for 6 minutes each time. Well, that's fine because
which gives us that.
Yeah. So we're not looking for parallel jobs. So in some respects, we are just probably, as Pete says, stuck in a queue waiting for availability because we are not paying for it now that the urgency is not necessarily there, maybe.
Potentially. I guess we could also try a private agent, but then that's going to give us other headaches into.
Yeah, I don't like that. I'd rather them manage it.
Deploying. Yeah.
So I've just got the blog post up on the screen about this particular issue of losing the grant. I'll just paste the link in the chat. And one of the interesting things that they've got in there is that if you're a maintainer of an open source project, you are likely already using a GitHub repository to manage your source code. So we strongly recommend using GitHub Actions for your CI needs. They do. But if you still decide that you want to use Azure pipelines, then we're working on a process to support your needs, and please stay tuned. This change does not impact our existing open source or public project users. It only impacts new projects, which is exactly what you just said.
And even though we've also changed it to private, so that will be, that's.
Although the update at the bottom of that blog, Pete, does say we have an updated process for you to request the free grant of parallel jobs. Please send an email to. But we don't need.
We're not using parallel jobs. No. You have to specify your. I think. Well, don't you have to make your pipeline in such a way that it can make use of parallel jobs as well? Not sure it does much.
Not necessarily. So, like, if you've got multiple pipelines running, they're a job each as well.
Yeah.
So, like, we will have that in a minute, or rather, we do now. In fact.
Oh, is it running now?
Nope.
Well, that was a lie then.
But we do have 2 jobs queued. So if we had the parallel jobs running, then we could do that. Both, So I don't know if changing this back to a public project makes a difference.
Well, make it worse. You would have thought, if anything. But I mean, why? All right. So new public projects created in Azure DevOps are no longer. So the private one, there's limitations for that, isn't there? That you don't get with the public one, which is the reason why people were mining Bitcoin on the public grant. That's what they were doing. So that's what they were trying to eradicate, which has affected all of us open source hosting people, which is a real pain in the behind for anybody like us and people that have got valuable projects sitting on there as well. But I mean, the nice thing is they're not applying that to existing ones, but they must also have a way of detecting these people that are mining Bitcoin to get rid of them. From that process.
Interesting. One of the first comment on that blog says, since the recommendation here is used GitHub Actions, it seems like crypto miners will hardly be affected, as all they need to do is switch to GitHub Actions. Fair point. And this commenter says that it feels like Microsoft is sunsetting Azure DevOps in favor of GitHub, but doesn't wish to directly acknowledge it. But that's their opinion, not ours.
Yep.
Oh, quite. So, I mean, the thing that we've got here as well. So we've got our pool, and we've got those 2 jobs in there. And so on, of which we have our top one sat there for the GitWatcher API. If I go back into our settings in here, we get to parallel jobs. The thing that I noticed whilst everybody was sort of chatting away is obviously we've got this free projects thing down here. So if we go to view in progress jobs, there are none in progress, none at all. If I go to here, it shows we have that.
Because it's a private project, not a public project. So those are the 2 different sections.
Correct. There. Even though I have since made it a public project. So let me...
But you kicked that job off in...
Yeah.
So I'm going to cancel this.
Good idea.
And try again.
Yep. Turn it off and turn it back on again.
Yeah, exactly.
Great minds.
80% of problems solved by this.
If that doesn't work, hit it.
I was contemplating. I was talking exactly that this morning. That technology responds to threats of violence, and then non-technical people.
Percussive maintenance.
Yeah, exactly. Non-technical people think you've done something amazing, and then really we just get left feeling like, well, we still don't know what the root cause was, and that's unsatisfactory.
Yes.
I'd rather things
Okay, so let's go into our pipelines in here. And our agent pools. And that's still happily doing its thing. It's sat there doing nothing.
Well, I mean, while this is going on, obviously, we mentioned IoT Live later, 9 p.m. GMT. There is also more shows coming up this week. So tomorrow during the day, we've got Johnny Chips thingamy in the day.
What? No, that's Friday. No, tomorrow's Wednesday, which means it is Azure After Dark in the evening at 8 p.m.
Yes, Bridge Crew, in fact, or golf. I don't know, but probably Bridge Crew. Yeah,
probably Jonathan. Where we'll attempt to talk tech whilst commanding one of the enterprises, or maybe even continuing with the Aegis campaign.
Can we continue where we left off with that one thing left to do? I'm not sure.
No, you'd have to go do the whole mission again.
Ah, jeez.
We'll just be quicker this time. That's the thing.
Well, it was the crashing that was. It was the exiting out of the online session that was the biggest problem.
It did balk us out several times, which anybody rewatching that stream will understand.
Yes.
So that's
as well
still
as Pete and Liam jousting.
Jousting.
Yeah. Yeah, and on top of that, then, on Thursday at 2 p.m., we've got another IoT Live with Benjamin Carbe, finishing off our LoRaWAN Azure Digital Twins Blender setup. And then, in conversation with on Friday with Johnny Chips.
Yep.
So,
yeah. So, I am going to move on with building out this pipeline stuff here.
Yep,
I think that's our option.
It's a good idea.
Handily, on this particular one, I've already written a blog post on exactly what we need to do, which I'll pop in the chat. It's all about building a static site and deploying it to Azure. Deploying it to a storage account with Azure DevOps. The Terraform,
similar to what we did for the Christmas project, wasn't
it? Let's say yes.
Let's say.
I can't remember.
That's fine. That's the politician's
3 months ago.
I know it's a long while ago, but for Santa's letter room, I'm sure we hosted something equivalent. Or I remember referring back to your blog at some point. Is what I'm getting at.
Yes.
Right.
So the only thing that we don't have in this blog post is actually doing the build of the static site.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we did write something about that, but I will double check. I don't think we did. But so we're still going to need to do some of the same tasks from before. So if I open up our GitHub, to Git Watcher, and we can copy and paste some of these things out. So let me zoom in a little bit as well. Because I also need to move this into the right folder in a little bit. In our API, we are already doing some of these tasks. So we're going to want to have some stages again as well, I imagine.
Yeah.
And some paths as well. So let's take our paths, because we're going to want that. In fact, we want all of this just here.
Is there, this is probably just being stupid, but is there a way that you can kick off a GitHub action from the end of a DevOps pipeline?
Probably. You could make I imagine you could
HTTP call.
Yeah,
I'm guessing, but at the same point, is it's replicating pretty much what we're doing.
Well, we've already got a fully working pipeline, but it's just deploying to the wrong place at the moment. That's all. But
I guess the question is, why would you?
Because perhaps reading that blog post and agreeing with the other people there, you don't want to start putting more and more infrastructure into DevOps, Azure DevOps. Perhaps you're thinking laterally and you want to start putting stuff bit by bit over into GitHub Actions as you go. And it'd be nice if there was a way that you could manage that migration by being able to kick off stuff in GitHub Actions.
Well, yes. I mean, if this doesn't get its act together, we might be accelerating doing our next series in doing the same in GitHub Actions.
Yeah, Control Alt Delete.
Pretty much, yeah.
Format C : yeah. I know. I tell you how we can get everybody onto GitHub Actions. Let's give them 10% of the workers that we could give them before.
Spinning thread.
So I'm going to take basically all of these bits for now. And we're going to replace this steps with the stage for doing the build, with the job for doing the build. We're using .NET Core 3.1.x still, and we're doing our build here. So we're going to change this to be client, because that's what we called it. I believe the project is still called client.cs proj. Build. Client. Again, client. Oh, no, black client end. No, that's not a thing. Client as well. We're doing a .NET publish too. So we're going to publish that. We're putting that out to our artifact staging directory still. And then we're dropping that into our artifact staging directory as well. So that should do everything that we want it to do in terms of build here. I don't think we need to use publish web project still, but we'll find that out when we run it. And then we want to add in really the next kind of stage, which is going to be to do some of the infra bits. Now we don't have our Terraform set up for this yet, but we will do. So I'm just going to save this really quickly so that we can drop in and do some of that. So zoom in a little bit. Pull everything down just to make sure we're up to date as well.
Random side note, as I've tripped over a Reddit thing that 6 days ago, somebody's spoken to Microsoft and seems the issue is limited to Ubuntu 20.04 and Ubuntu latest. There is a workaround to set the build agent to Ubuntu 18.04 for the moment.
Okay.
I don't know if this will work or, because I'm only reading the first comment.
Highlights in your region may be impacted by life science.
They were watching the stream and then realised, damn, we need to put
thanks, Microsoft.
Yep, thank you for that. Appreciate
it.
Before. Click this check status. Click that check status.
That's how cutting edge we are.
This is live, just to prove how live.
There we go. Look, Pipelines has now got an exclamation mark in it. Look, not all green.
Kingdom.
Of course, it's the United Kingdom.
No, see, we caused it. That's what it was.
That's what it's going to point to.
It's our fault. Yeah.
When that exclamation mark changes to an Azureish live logo, then we'll know we're in trouble.
Oh, in the big time, I know, one or the other.
In the meantime, though, with the last 15 minutes, let's put together the Terraform for this at least.
But I mean, this is a real world problem. This happens.
Yeah,
Jonathan mentioned it earlier that you need to have this in a plan, and you could be you could lose half a day to something like this quite easily.
Absolutely.
So it's important to factor these sorts of things in, which you are using somebody else's infrastructure for all of this. So you are going to take your life in your own hands. You could have self-hosted build agents for this. That gets you around that, and there are a load of good reasons to use self-hosted. Yeah, a heap of good reasons to use self-hosted build agents. Certainly, one of them is this. Another one is that perhaps Microsoft don't offer you the platform you need to build on. So if maybe you're building for IoT, which of course I would know about, you want to build for a 32-bit OS for Linux, which they don't offer.
You have to weigh that up against the fact that you're then responsible for managing that infrastructure.
Yes.
And so the benefit of the hosted pools is that you are just relying on Microsoft looking after them, and occasionally they do go down. So it's back to SLAs and how urgently you need to get your code changes out.
Yeah.
And having a backup plan, because, as well, this is currently saying that this is only United Kingdom region. Again, it's these things you can't sometimes get around because it's not like we hosted our pools in the UK for definite, but it's probably tied to our Azure AD instance that we're using or something that's steered us to the content delivery networks picked us to use that or whatever. But yeah, you're right. This is the nature of the cloud, is that we've gone from reliable hardware running unreliable software to unreliable hardware running reliable software, which is something in my DevOps talk.
Well, that depends who's making the software, obviously.
Well, true, but the assumption's changed that we used to kick bits of servers and tin and go, well, it's going to be fine because we own the kit. And it's like, well, that wasn't necessarily the case, because it was harder to then get a replacement server when it did fail. So that risk is then on you. But it's the same with hosted agents, is that having your own build agents, suddenly you then have to manage those agents. So I'd much prefer to rely on Microsoft's pool, and it doesn't go down.
Oh yeah.
If we don't have to care as much about it, then that's cool. I mean, there's lots of ways you can run your own agents as well. So like you can pull down an executable you can install, and then you're entirely dependent on the tool set that you want as well. And you might want to be able to, I think Pete mentioned it earlier, around caching dependencies and do that kind of own lifecycle thing. Or maybe, it needs to be to an extent air gapped, I guess. But there's also things like, you can run it. It's a Docker container, and it's all open source, and you can go and have a look at it online and build your own containers out of it. You might want to maybe run your own build agents in Azure container instances or in Kubernetes or kind of any of the above, really, and make it as scalable as you like. I've seen some really good implementations where they're using VM scale sets as well. So you have enough agents for parallel jobs on demand. Obviously, there's a lead time into those spinning up as well, but plenty of choice available. I guess a more recent use case for probably doing some of your own agents is if you need to build anything for the M1 Max, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to whether you need to be experts in build agents or whether that's not, there are those scenarios you've just described are some reasons why you would spend the time to get it right. But obviously, if it's something that you can avoid. But in this case, with a live demo, something we can't avoid. So yeah, it looks like in the last 7 days, there have been 3 problems that have affected the UK build agent. So, but before that, not so many.
Right. Good. So I am cheating a little bit here and using some code that I wrote earlier.
All the best demos.
Storage account client main.tf. So let's just quickly talk through what we're doing here. Let's move that down so you can see. So a lot like last time, we're telling it what backend we need and everything else. So you've got our locals that are set up based on our variables from before, similar principle. And we've taken copies of these rather than just using the same ones because we want to be able to treat it as its own artifact, essentially. We have an extra local here with no separator, because I'm sure, as everybody knows, you can't put special characters or dashes or anything into storage account names. They have to be globally unique. I think up to 24 characters long. And
it's the only instance, it's the only resource that I found has got that restriction.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're doing then is we're setting some tags on the resource group, and we're just going to deploy the resource group. It's following the same convention that we did before. And then what we have is we're actually then setting up our storage account. So we're going for a storage V2 flavor. We're using the standard SKU, and we're going to use GRS. We're also going to enable HTTPS traffic only. And then all we have to do to make it or to enable the static website hosting option is to add in this little block here in the resource, which is static website, and then set the index document, which should be indexation. Yeah. If you're doing this in ARM, it's somewhat more of a ball ache.
It's not like ARM at all.
Yeah. By the end of all of these things, I'm hoping to convince Jonathan that Terraform
I'm absolutely fine.
Like...
I am going to want to do a future episode where I actually get to do the alternative in ARM, just so I'll do it as homework. I won't do it live on stream, and we can do a compare and contrast.
Yeah. And then maybe a bicep in between.
Yeah, maybe a bicep in between. Why not?
And then what we've got, one of the things I've got here, because I also used this example for a TerraScan blog post that I did, where we're checking policies and stuff. So one thing that we want on compliance, or one of the compliance rules, is to have a resource group lock on there as well, so it can't be deleted. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to push all of that back.
showing my age now, but compliance just always makes me think of the film Flight of the Navigator, which the ship always said every time that the young boy gave them command.
One of my favourite films as a kid.
Such a good film. The other random fact, and I've never been able to prove this otherwise, I'm convinced that when I watched it on one VHS rental copy back when that used to be a thing, that I'm convinced there was a different voice actor for the ship that was a far more chirpy and wacky, and I've never been able to find whether I'm just remembering it wrong. But anyway, it's a great film.
You just had that. There was a little pot inside those VHS things that could speed up and slow down the tape. And I think you probably just
tracking.
had that.
I just had the tracking on wrong.
Yeah. Speaking of things when we were kids, there was as a tangent whilst we're waiting for things to catch up. Having a conversation at work yesterday around like things we used to watch as a kid, and I for the longest time genuinely thought I was just making this up and I'd imagined it. But I remember a TV show where there was like it was effectively puppets, and they all had Australian voices because I imagine it was one from Australia, and like there was a cuddly it was like an early Toy Story, so it was like a cuddly elephant puppet. There was this truck, and then there was like a hot water bottle with a look on its face like it had seen some stuff in its time. And I've spoken to people about this for a number of times over the years, and I'd convinced myself that maybe my parents had just kept me drugged up in my years, and I'm just imagining this. But it turns out no, someone else at work remembers it and found it on YouTube, and it's called Johnson and Friends, and it is the weirdest thing that I've ever seen, and it probably explains a lot as to the person that I am today. But yeah, right. And Tailspin was another one. I thought that I'd made that up as well, and I just dreamed that Baloo from the Jungle Book was a pilot. That seems to still not be going anywhere. So
yeah, the incident's not moved on any further. I've just refreshed it.
Yep, we broke the internet.
Unfortunate timing.
That's what happens. Check back next week to see further adventures in a damn build agent not running.
To see this incident is over. So what we're going to do now, very quickly, is we've got all of these bits in, and we're going to add in another job now. Like we had before, we're probably going to need to run the prereqs piece as well, and we're going to want this infrastructure section again too. So let's do all of that.
Of course, what you actually need to do is browse to xkcd.com/303, because that's exactly what this is. It's the classic compiling cartoon.
Yes, yeah. We want the same prereqs as before. We're going to use the same resource group. We're going to use the same storage account. But what we're going to do instead, when we get round to that point, is we're going to add in another container for the client instead.
Did we miss it? You just copied that. Where did you copy that one from? The bottom one. Did we use that already? The resource management.
This one.
Yes, it's because I remember. This is the creation of the thing for Terraform. I was going to say, because I was looking at the name that you've just posted in, going, we should replace those with variables. And I was like, hang on a minute, we're not at that stage yet. We haven't got access to the. Because I was looking at AZL TF state hyphen, and I was like, you could replace UKS with UK South. And it's like, no, you can't, not yet. We haven't got Terraform working yet.
Yeah.
Although saying that, in the past I've used Key Vault instead of this replace tokens thing.
Well, we talked about that last time, didn't we? So we could use Key Vault, but it also depends on what's actually secret and what's not. Let me just recopy that, because I could have done a better job of copying that and actually use all the white space that we need because it's YAML. That's a lot easier. Okay. So for the most part, this is going to stay exactly the same at this stage. We're going to the same storage account. We're going to use the same key and container name. But what we're going to do,
just while you're doing that, we've got at the bottom. We're spinning up what's showing at the bottom of the screen and all the infrastructure behind that. That's what we're doing. And that bottom of that screen uses a Signal R connection. We're also spinning up the Signal R process, are we? I forget, because we've got a Signal R service that we're using in.
We do indeed. You're right. But that's not part of the web app, though, is it? I mean, it depends whether we want that dependency. I suppose it would make sense to define it in the front end pipeline, but
so we've not done that yet. We do need to do that. Well, same as we need to do the proxy. I figured that I'm not actually sure where we would put that. I think maybe you're right, Jonathan. Maybe the Signal service is done at this stage.
Yeah, that's my thoughts. It wouldn't be part of the web app. I'd put it as part of the whole infrastructure. None of this works without that, essentially, does it?
Yeah, exactly. So the success of the front end relies on being able to publish to or read from the Signal R service, doesn't it?
How about this?
We'll do that next time.
Don't swear.
What we do instead is maybe with the API we do the Signal service.
Yep.
And then the front end is the Blazor client alongside the proxy.
Makes sense. Yeah, because I suppose that the API is publishing to the Signal service, whereas the front end is consuming from.
Mm-hmm. I have a follow-on question. So as part of this whole deploy process, we will be tearing down possibly and spinning up the Signal R service, which will possibly break the Signal R link to the front end. Have we got the auto reconnect in our Signal, that we learnt with the robot arm code?
I think this might be where we learned to do it.
I can't remember. Yeah, it might be.
Let's have a look.
It would be nice if it didn't break it, because trying to refresh it for you, Liam, with OBS is probably not simple.
Yeah, it's in there.
With automatic reconnect. Yeah, good.
Brilliant. Just a little tidbit of information there, because obviously it's possible. Although, to be fair, the Signal R service probably won't change because it's just a Signal R service. I'm not sure there's even tiers available for it. I can't remember. I've got
again, these are the interesting facts about trying your CI/CD rather than just assuming it works once and it'll work forever. You almost need to go through the deployment while somebody's using your application in anger to bottom out what dependencies. If you're going to break the service while you're updating it, then you need to know that to work out when you're going to do it or how you're going to make it highly available. So
Yep. How does this work in a large scale enterprise type scenario? Would you have like something that's actually sitting there in production running, and then you deploy all of this and then swap? Is that what you do? So like an A/B type
there's
idea?
So many patterns. I mean, that's one way you can do you could steer the traffic. Certainly with front ends, you could certainly do a whole separate deploy and steer over using a load balancer to a different pool. But again, it depends on state as well. If we're talking about session state, certainly with old school .NET stuff, you used to have session state to consider as well.
Like you say, there's so many different ones.
You can also do forward compatible deploys where a newer version of the application could work with the older implementation of, say, if the Signal R message stayed the same, you could risk bringing in new services into the app pool that were a future version of the application, but the older ones would still work until you wound them down, so you didn't have an outage. So scaling is a completely different problem, but there's ways around that.
And what about if you've got users, just like we've just spoken about with Signal R, using the service that potentially you're going to tear down? Is there a feedback mechanism that you can get to determine whether or not you can run that A/B swap over? Or
you can also do set things to run gracefully and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah. And also designing your front end to actually cope with being disconnected and working out what would happen if it's that whole thing with cloud. If just assume that the service is going to disappear at some point.
Yeah.
Not just because of your Terraform deploy, but because it could just be unavailable.
I mean, I guess you've also got, we've only got a minute of the show left, so let's quickly talk about this. So, like with Blue Green, like Jonathan mentioned, you can do things like steadily transfer traffic over from one to the other, and you can map, depending on what tools you're using to do that, you can map users to different things and all sorts. Or I quite like a rolling deployment. So I do a lot of work in Kubernetes, and the default deployment strategy there is to do a rolling deploy. So let's say I've got 5 pods running or 5 instances running of a service. It will actually then burst a new one of version 2 and then drop an old one off, and then deploy another new one of version 2, then drop an old one off. So it'll do it gradually over a period of time.
Yeah. And you can also make sure that the next version can cope with older versions of the message, and then you maybe version 3, you drop support for version 1. So that whole forwards and backwards compatibility thing is something that you have to think about when you're deploying a rolling service. It's a different beast than just saying, right, we're just going to take it down. And especially where companies are trying to chase 3 nines, 4 nines. By that I mean 99.999% uptime. There's very few minutes in the year that you can actually have something completely down if you were to need to have a completely breaking change. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. So there's quite a lot we can do with.
Well, fingers crossed that next time we won't have pipeline delays to.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, we still got quite a lot done.
Yeah, we did.
On this show. So we should be in a place that next time our API will deploy, like Jonathan's mentioning. We've started to put together the pipeline for our front end. So we have our build for our Blazor app, which is 99% the same as building a regular .NET Core app. And we've also put together a Terraform for that front end piece. Next time, so we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time, which I think, looking at calendar, is the 23rd of March. What we'll do is we'll make sure that all of this works, and then we'll add in our Signaler service and our functions proxy as well, before we get on to then adding our production environment. So if you're around later this evening around 9 p.m, you can also come straight back here to the channel and join Pete, Clifford, Aegis, and I can't remember who else you said, Pete.
Olivier Block from the Microsoft IoT team. Yep. Fabulous guy.
And that'll be for IoT Live, and they're going to take a look at all of the IoT news from MS Ignite. Plus, if you've been following Pete on Twitter, all of the fun Oculus work he's been doing with the remote robot arm work that we've done a talk on before as well. And then throughout the rest of the week, tomorrow from 8 p.m. GMT, we'll have Pete, Jonathan, myself, and Derek returning from his paternity leave for us to go and see what could possibly go wrong aboard the USS Azureish.
Make it so.
Exactly. And then on Thursday at 2 p.m. as well, IoT Live is back with Pete, Ben Carb, and Cliff as well, and they'll be continuing their LoRaWAN adventures there. And then on Friday at 6:30 p.m. GMT, we'll have the latest episode of Johnny Chips in conversation with as well. So once again, folks, thank you for watching. As always, please consider following us here on Twitch, or even subscribing with your Prime benefit or not your Prime benefit if you feeling particularly flush with cash to support the channel. Or you can follow us over on YouTube as well. Once again, folks, thank you so much for watching. And we will see you again next time.